Well, coming up on the week ahead, Israeli troops are preparing for a ground assault on the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. The battle for the Amazulu throne is set to resume in the High Court in Pretoria tomorrow. And the world commemorates White Cane Safety Awareness Day. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the week ahead. We're coming to you live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg. My name is Naledi Moleo, with you over the next hour, and in that time looking forward to getting some of your interaction on our social media platforms. On Twitter, the handle is @weekahead, or tweet us using the hashtag #TheWeekAhead. Let's take a look at the stories that lead at this hour. Well, it's just over a week in and it's still a big story globally. Israeli troops are preparing for a ground assault on the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. Israel has vowed to annihilate the militant group Hamas in retaliation for a rampage in which its fighters stormed through Israeli towns 8 days ago, killing around 1,300 people. Israel responded by subjecting Gaza to the most intense bombardment it has ever seen. Gaza authorities say more than 2,200 people have been killed and nearly 10,000 wounded. For more on the Israel-Hamas conflict, we spoke to SABC News correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv.
The IDF has just announced an extension of these safe passages for people in northern Gaza to move to the south. It is now 11 a.m. local time. They have until 1. So look, that is another 2 hours that people have to try and move from the north to the south. But look, it is a very dangerous journey, and a lot of residents in Gaza say they are too afraid to make it. We've seen these horrific videos circulating coming from yesterday when a convoy was blown up on the road, dozens of people killed, wounded. This horrific video is being denied. Well, the IDF says it denies responsibility for this airstrike on this truck, although it says Hamas was actually responsible, setting booby traps on the road. But look, you know, the images we're seeing coming out of Gaza are just horrendous. The hospitals are completely overwhelmed. The United Nations says the situation on the ground is, quote, untenable. There are more than 10,000 people who've been wounded. Thousands more have been killed. And look, just looking at those pictures of the rubble of all of these destroyed buildings, that number is certainly set to rise. Now, in terms of a ground operation, Israeli troops continue to mount on the Gaza border. Sderot residents, this is a community, a big town right on the Gaza border. It is apparently being evacuated in the next few hours. So look, the situation is certainly moving very, very rapidly. People on the ground are really awaiting this expected ground offensive. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he's visited troops down on the border, saying that this will be a large operation, saying the next stage is coming very soon, adding that it will be from the ground, from the sea and from the sky. So look, really the tension here, it's everyone's on a knife's edge waiting for this next move to be made by the IDF. Israel says it is not targeting civilians. It says this is why it's giving these increased timeframes for people to safely evacuate. Israel says it is targeting Hamas, which it says hides behind its civilians, using them as human shields. The IDF came out a little while ago to say its main objective in Gaza is not to hurt the people there. It is to secure the safe release of these hostages that were taken more than a week ago now. We understand that there are around 150, if not more, people being held in the Gaza Strip. They are believed to be held in these so-called terror tunnels, which run all underneath Gaza. Now, the IDF says in order to do that, a large-scale military campaign must take place, but it says, you know, these civilians must go to the south to ensure their safety. But look, we are seeing still airstrikes happening down in the south, and in reality, these people have nowhere to go. They cannot leave the Gaza Strip. The Rafah crossing, which was open reportedly yesterday for foreigners to leave, for US citizens also, has reportedly remained shut. So there are people amassing down in the south waiting to get out, and at the same time, no humanitarian aid is getting in. So Israel is apparently working right now with the United States, with Egypt, to try and facilitate some sort of a humanitarian corridor, given that power has run out, petrol has basically run out, food also, and people barely have any water. These hospitals are having to basically prioritise people with their treatment, saying that if aid doesn't get into the Strip very, very soon, then these hospitals will turn into mass graves. Now, we have heard doctors from the Palestinian Red Crescent in Al-Shifa, the biggest hospital in the Gaza Strip, saying they will not evacuate, they will not leave people there who simply cannot be evacuated. We do need to remember that there are people there with serious illnesses even before this started, and of course people who've been seriously injured during this last 8 days of fighting.
Well, some South Africans who are sympathizing with the state of Israel have blasted the South African government for not condemning the atrocities by Hamas. They have gathered in Johannesburg to pay homage to Israeli citizens who died last weekend in an incursion organized by Hamas. Israeli government has declared a war against Hamas. Kaelihle Khumalo joins us now live with the latest. Kaelihle, good morning to you. Who are these protesters that you're seeing out there, and what are they saying?
Well, that's right, Naledi. It's been a very emotionally charged day here as the Israeli flags are being hoisted, really paying homage to those citizens, the civilians who died in that tragedy when Hamas really had that massive incursion in Israel. So it's just a group of South Africans, really, who are friends of Israel, who are saying that these atrocities should be denounced by all accounts. But joining us now is Prof from the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. Prof, thank you so much indeed for your time. So you were just talking about the stance that South African government has taken. I mean, we saw the president of this country wearing the Palestinian scarf and really pledging solidarity to the Palestinians, but not really saying much about the atrocities that were committed by Hamas.
Absolutely. So as a South African Jewish community, we watched in absolute horror on Saturday while our worlds shattered. And to be quite honest, I think most countries saw the significance and the way in which this is different from anything that has occurred since the Holocaust. And we waited in vain for our government to express a word of condemnation of rape, murder, baby killing, hostage taking, and abuse of the elderly and of dead bodies. We waited for a word, not a word. We waited for a word of consolation, for a word of empathy, for a word of compassion from our government, and we received nothing as a Jewish community. On a holy day, the holy day of the Sabbath, suddenly our president found his voice. And what was his voice? It wasn't a voice of compassion. It wasn't a voice of empathy for the Jews who were killed just because they were Jewish. It was a voice that was done to insult and to rub salt in the wounds of the Jewish community.
And what would be your message to the South African government, Prof? We know that they have been calling for cessation of hostilities. At times, they would talk about the two-state solution as a very viable option in terms of addressing this very long-standing conflict. But what would be your message to South Africa at this point?
So everybody believes, I certainly believe, that peace is still possible, and certainly that a two-state solution is possible. But we sit here with hostages still in Gaza, and my message to the government of South Africa, and particularly to the President of South Africa, is to recognize the trauma that we have experienced, recognize the nature of the atrocities that were committed. Only when we recognize the preciousness of Jewish blood alongside the preciousness of innocent blood, including Palestinian blood, will we find peace.
And just before I let you go, Prof, I mean, obviously there are growing calls as well for the humanitarian corridors to be opened in Gaza to make sure that there is aid, especially because civilians are also caught up in the crossfire.
All I can say is I have tremendous compassion for the civilians caught up in the crossfire. And I hope and pray that this war will end soon and that our hostages will be released and that we can find reasonable people to have peace with them.
All right. Prof, thank you so much indeed for your time. Of course, Naledi, representing the South African Jewish Board of Deputies there, really just also a very clear message from so many South Africans who are here. Naledi, you had the political parties, the likes of the Democratic Alliance, COPE, ACDP, really saying that what happened in Israel was absolutely terrible. But obviously you do also have another side that is saying the really just main issue is around the territorial dispute that has been going on for quite a number of years now in the Middle East.
Well, Kylie Kumalo, our reporter there in Johannesburg, speaking to South Africans that have gathered, of course, to pay homage to the Israeli citizens who have lost their lives in the conflict. We'll take a short break. We're back in a moment. You're still watching the week ahead. So the Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Committee is expected to release its November statement this coming week. Now, in its last report, the Reserve Bank governor said that inflation has eased over the course of the year, but a further slowdown in inflation looks less certain. He also said growth forecasters remain muted. Well, to unpack what we're expecting to hear this week, we're joined by economist Mr. Myelani Mkhabela, who is the CEO of Antwisa Capital. Good afternoon to you. Thank you for making time for us on this Sunday afternoon.
Good afternoon, and the viewers.
Yeah, I think let's start with your forecast. This coming Thursday, what are you expecting we'll hear?
So the forecast for we expect a repo rate hold for the entire year, and then we are not really expecting anything that could really disturb in terms of the repayments or changes in terms of the repo rate. So our expectation remains a repo rate hold. And then we are not seeing any indication from the monetary point of view, whether it can be on food and energy prices, that probably can come out to surprise and have probably inflation that is not manageable.
I mean,
so from that context, we expect them to still have a repo rate hold.
Yeah, I mean, I'm keen to hear just more motivation of why you give what some would call an optimistic point of view, especially when we're running images right now of just the petrol pumps and what South Africans are going through, where that is concerned, how that leads to an increase in food prices and that trickle-down effect, and you still being optimistic somehow. And then, of course, there's the global geopolitical situation with Israel and Hamas now taking center stage. What does that do to global markets?
I think is the continuation which the market are now used to. We had COVID-19, and then we had Russia-Ukraine war, which is a natural continuation of global or geopolitics, which I will say it is not really impactful at this point in time compared to the Russia-Ukraine war that had a massive hit with regard to food production in both countries that are predominantly used by our generation and people that are as well younger to us, like when you look on instant foods, so like Russia, Ukraine come up to be producing a lot of wheat. And then when you look at that on the other side, you look at Russia as a dominant economy producing oil as well. So you look at a comparison of Russia, Ukraine and Palestine, Israel. it's really small. It's something that we can live with. It's something that doesn't need us to consider that much from the monetary policy point of view. It's something when they are tired, they will just relax and do what is expected from them.
Yeah, you talk about what we can live with. Certainly in South Africa, we've learned to live with quite a bit. Load shedding, one of them, of course, water shortages. And then you've got, and essentially what I want to do now is talk about the domestic pressures that we've got. You've got Treasury, coming out and saying it's under strain, that, the fiscus just isn't coping at this point. I mean, are those going to be long-term factors for how South Africans then need to start budgeting to pay off their debts?
After a crisis, predominantly, whether you look at different crises in different layers, you find that fiscal constraints come up to be a situation, because you find that revenue collection gets to be lower, and then the expectations in terms of implementations are higher. So the balance will really match in terms of what it is desired to be implemented, whereas towards an election year, where probably the ruling party will be expected to do so much with less revenue. But it is something that probably, if they have planned well, because we are having a 2 trillion budget. So if they have planned well, they can be in a position to use that budget that we have, or that they collect from the citizens of South Africa, entrusted with that. But I don't think there is proper planning in terms of treasury and budgeting, and that leads to these massive shortages that are really not expected. Yeah. Okay,
let's sit with your forecasting a little bit here, because you're expecting a repo rate hold this week, and you're saying until the end of the year. Will we see that sort of relief being given to consumers? We know that we pay for it later on. So what does that mean? That we tighten our belts and expect things to get even more difficult as we go into 2024?
I think people have to live within their means, continue to live within their means, not excessive credit cards, but there are practical things. Energy will affect people, because the country has a problem with energy security. Oil prices, there is a 30% increase in oil prices as a result of Ukraine and Saudi Arabia cutting production. So when demand continue to be higher for oil and manufacturing, all these smart factories and industries that we have all over the world will continue to demand like oil. But at the same time, there has been a massive demand from China. So you look at that causing as well an increase in prices, because there is less oil with high demand, and that practically will cause high prices in terms of the law of demand and supply.
Yeah, obviously we'll have to chat again later on this week to see if your forecasting is on point.
It is always on point. I think the market probably by now will have confidence in the forecast that we have. I would say in about 22 repo rate or MPC sitting, we only got it wrong twice. So that we are confident with what we do.
Okay, now you're putting your money down. You're really putting your money down on this one, and so we will chat later on this week. But let's put some power back in the consumer's hands, right? What is it that we do? Every time we hear about, we're going to be getting the MPC meeting and releasing of interest rates this week. Our chests really do tighten as South Africans. What do we do? How can we get control back?
I think one of the things that we can do to control many things, I think, is to go back to basics, and then we have small backyard gardens where we can probably have agricultural products, and then we probably have each and every family feeding itself with regard to agricultural products, because there are simple things like spinach, carrots, beetroots. Those things, are possible to do in a small yard, and then people can probably work on having a bench of 3-month production within their yards. And if we get back to such basics, because like our generation or people that are living, they have a lot of simplicities. When you look at retail shops are as well selling the seeds, and anyone can really manage to buy seeds, and make a small garden and have families to feed themselves. Besides that, it could be people live within their means, which in the current moment, I don't think it could be that much easier because already consumers are overstressed with their repayments or managing their homes.
Yeah, I think I actually really do appreciate the advice that you've given us, because so often we're told, tighten your belts, try and spend less, but the idea of trying to become self-sustainable, an important one. Mr. Mielane, thank you so much for speaking to us. We really do appreciate your time. Mielane Mkhabela, of course, is the CEO of Antwisa Capital. You're watching The Week Ahead. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. So, members of the royal family supporting Princess Makate Zulu's claim to the throne say they are confident that they have enough grounds to challenge King Misuzulu Kazwelithini to the throne. The battle for the throne case is set to resume in the High Court in Pretoria tomorrow. The case was postponed in May after the king requested a postponement on the basis that he was still waiting for the late AmaZulu traditional Prime Minister Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi to depose his affidavit.
Princess Makate has argued in his court challenge that a meeting of the family to nominate the new monarch wasn't properly constituted. He also says that members of the family had identified him as successor. He also wants President Cyril Ramaphosa to review his appointment of King Misuzulu as leader of the AmaZulu nation. The case was adjourned in May this year in order to allow King Misuzulu, who is opposing the matter, to file outstanding documents.
On those bases, we are confident that even if the matter were not to proceed on Monday for whatever technicality, but eventually, as truth has prevailed over lies, as light has always prevailed over darkness, we will indeed prevail. I thank you.
A legal expert says there are challenges in interpreting customary law.
So in this case, it becomes very difficult to determine what exactly is the true and authentic form of that particular law and what it ought to be. The only reprieve in which we're going to have is then to go back and to say to those individuals that previously existed within a particular point in time, how did you handle these particular matters? Do you have it done on affidavit? Do you have any other circumstantial evidence and supporting evidence that you might be able to prove? If the answer is no, then it means that it is not a practice which was usually followed.
King Misuzulu is expected to argue that his mother, the late Queen Manthombi, was appointed in the late king's will as regent after the passing of the king, and which meant that the heir and successor would emanate from the house of Her Majesty, the regent. Meanwhile, King Misuzulu's supporters urged maidens and regiments together in their numbers at the Pretoria High Court to support the king. Londi Khatew, SABC News, Durban.
Well, let's get more analysis on this story, and for that we're joined by Melusi Xulu, who is a legal analyst. Mr. Xulu, a good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. The royal family heads back to court tomorrow in the High Court in Pretoria. I mean, just upon hearing that or those news, what is your initial thought? Let's start there.
Good afternoon to Naledi and the viewer at home. Well, my interest in this case is there has to be a discussion about the customs on how a king or Isilo is recognized. And secondly, we also have to look at the laws, which in KZN, there's the KZN Leadership and Governance Act 2005, which has its own description how a king is recognized. So I think that will be the argument, because the main issue is how was the meeting convened when the king was recognized by the royal family.
Yeah, and before we actually get into then the legal matters here and really what sort of legal standing either one of the family really can use, let's talk a little bit about if it is a concern at all that the Prime Minister of the AmaZulu nation is not alive at this point to then handle the power struggle within the leadership of the AmaZulu nation.
I think it can be a concern that is no longer alive because remember, before he passed away, there was an affidavit that we were supposed to sign, which will describe how the king was recognized, or Isilo. However, I don't think everything should be just about him. We should focus about how the law is developed, and I think the critical issue would be what does the KZN Leadership Act that I just mentioned say about the recognition of the king? It says that there must be a meeting of the royal family that must choose the Isilo, and then they must take that particular information to the Premier of KZN, and then the minister must be involved, and then the Isilo will be recognized by a certificate from the president, and then there'll be a coronation. So the issue is in the beginning, how was that meeting convened? And if the royal family is saying we were not there, or maybe the meeting was not convened properly and some of the royal families could not have a view, then maybe that might be what has to be discussed. Or that's what, after arguments, the judge will have to say, because here's my take on this, and Naledi.
Yeah.
The act does not say what happens if the royal family does not agree. It just says the royal family must choose. But what if the royal family does not agree on who should be recognized? So that will be interesting. However, let me just go back to the customs before we move to the next question.
Sure.
I think what Isilo Msuzulu will make one of his main arguments will be to say, before his mother married his father, the king, uZwelithini Kapekzulu, there was an agreement that his mother, because she's coming from a royal family at Eswazini, 300 cattle must be chosen or must be collected by the families around KZN, so that if she's being lobola, or lobola is being paid for her, she will be the one who will give birth to the king because she's from the royal family. So that was a practice that was being established. But then that was before the KZN Leadership Governance Act of 2005. So it will be interesting how the judge will move around that, because there'll be that argument about the custom, and there'll be an argument about the meeting that is supposed to be done according to the KZN Leadership Act.
Yeah, the KZN Leadership Act and the Traditional Leadership Act are obviously going to be a central talking point then when they do head to court. Do you foresee a long court process here as well?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Are you foreseeing a long court process? Are we seeing the AmaZulu nation in court for a lengthy period of time?
Definitely, I'm seeing it going for a long period of time. We saw it when there was an issue with the Shembe, leadership that has to be chosen. And quite recently, I think the vendor King Tony, was taken to the Constitutional Court. So maybe it may happen that whoever does not win in this case, they might take it on appeal to Supreme Court of Appeal, maybe eventually to Constitutional Court. So I'm seeing a long drawn legal battle, but at least if it starts now and you know where it's leading to, and what arguments will be laid from the 16th to the 18th, I'll be interested to know what will be the final decision. Then after that, we will see who will appeal and what will be his reason for appeal.
I mean, this isn't going to be the first time that, as South Africans, for instance, we see traditional leadership taking each other on for the leadership role of a certain grouping, right? We certainly have seen it in the likes of the Reign Queen matter as well, or Queen Mujaji, and that ongoing matter. Is this perhaps a teaching moment for the judiciary in South Africa to really start to shape how it deals with traditional leadership and who has the final say?
Yes, look, every tribe, they obviously have their own ways of doing things, and every tribe will have to develop their customs according to the modern demand in terms of the constitution. And I will say this, for example, something that I'm seeing in future, not now, please don't take me out of context. I want to say the KZN Leadership and Governance Act 2005, when it speaks about Isilo, it only talks about Isilo as a male. It talks about Isilo as a male, and it doesn't say it's a female. So in future, I'm seeing those arguments, being laid in court that the females must also be civil. I'm just seeing it in the future. But for now, obviously, it's written the way it's written, and I wonder if it will be challenged in the future. So all I'm saying is the challenge of the judges is they have to check how the customs were done in the past, and they have to check how it can be developed according to the Constitution.
Yeah, it sounds like a job as well for the National House of Traditional Leaders to really start, thinking about legislating traditional leadership moving forward to give the state and the judiciary some sort of control over here. But where does that even go? Because one would argue that then takes the power away from tradition and cultural practice when we start to lean too much on the judiciary, correct?
It will always be a challenge, but remember, when we come to analyze South African law, the Constitution is the Supreme Court. It's the supreme law of the country. And if it happens that a custom is not going according to the Constitution, it will be invalid. So the test is the constitutional supremacy of the matter, whether it's a customary issue or any other issue that is under the sun of South African law. So it's not necessarily saying it's taking away the power from the traditional leadership, but it's trying to, the argument of the customs being changed is saying it's bringing it in line with the constitutional supremacy.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to step away from your legal hat for a moment and just talk about what we're seeing here happening with this AmaZulu nation, just as an average South African. You're concerned about what this does to the stability of one of the more important nations or groupings in South Africa.
I think for now, what we've seen now, generally, there's obviously a division with the royal family, but I don't think on the ground people have really, been that divided. Obviously, they are waiting to see what will happen, but there hasn't been any fights with the people on the ground. There is a concern, though, that there were some certain advisors of Isilo, Mesozulu, Kazoltini that were killed, I think, last year. I think 2 or 3 of them. So there is a concern about it. No one has been arrested. But I'm just saying on the ground, the people on the ground have not really shown that division. And hopefully it doesn't come to that point. And in whatever happens in court, I hope the royal family, the traditional leaders, and the government leaders will be able to sensitize people as to what is happening, because we obviously don't need any blood to be shed. We just need to understand how the law is developing, customary law, in this particular situation.
Yeah, well, let's leave it there. Melusi Xulu, of course, is a legal analyst joining us there via Teams, just sharing his legal opinion of what we're seeing with the members of the royal family supporting Princess Makate Zulu's claim to the throne heading to court tomorrow. It's a story that we'll be bringing you throughout the week here on SABC News. We take a short break. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. So in commemoration of White Cane Safety Day, the Nkosinathi Foundation of and for Blind and Partially Sighted People hosted White Cane Safety Day in Nelson Mandela Bay. The day is an annual observance dedicated to raising awareness about the importance of the white cane as a symbol of independence and mobility for individuals who are blind or visually impaired. This day also emphasizes the need for pedestrian safety and respect for the rights of people with visual disabilities. Lwando Nomoi reports.
Braving the cold weather for a common cause, to educate and raise awareness on the importance of the white cane. The white cane serves as a symbol of independence and mobility for the visually impaired. However, the blind community continues to face societal challenges and calls for inclusivity.
The challenges that we are facing as a blind people, we don't get employed, because they told us that the equipment that we are using as a blind person is very expensive for them, but they don't have the research of how to do things, and also they don't know how to deal with us as the blind people.
We struggle with the access to public transport, especially when it comes to the buses. Whenever I need to take the bus, I struggle to see the words written on the bus and where it is going, and the bus driver would shout at me, but that is the reason for this cane, to show them that I am visually impaired.
October month is also underpinned by the theme Love Your Eyes, which stresses the importance of eye care, specifically around the prevention and treatment of avoidable blindness.
This awareness will be very important even to the community, because they will really see the significance of the white cane as a tool for independence to our blind community. Even to the motorists, we want to give them the awareness that when they come across with a person walking with a white cane, they should just stop, don't hoot to them, because the hooter will confuse them, they will panic.
According to the National Federation of the Blind, 2 in every 8 people use a white cane in South Africa. Naledi Moleo, SABC News, Gqeberha.
Well, the month of October marks International Breast Cancer Awareness Month, which reflects awareness drives by public and private healthcare sectors. Now, breast cancer among South African women is on the rise, and it is one of the most common cancers among women in the country. Now, although it predominantly affects women, it can also affect men. Now, the early detection of breast cancer is one of the most important undertakings to successfully treat the disease. But let's get more now. For that, we're joined by Lorraine Govender, who is the National Manager of Health Promotion at Cancer. Lorraine, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time on this Sunday afternoon. I think let's start with just getting the stats, right? We talk about how it's one of the biggest cancers affecting women in South Africa. What are those stats looking like? And then, of course, how it compares with how breast cancer affects men in the country.
Thank you. Yes, breast cancer is the most common cancer affecting our women in the country. According to the National Cancer Registry, 1 in 27 women will be affected by cancer. So if you just look at that stats, in a room of 30 people, 1 of them at least will have breast cancer. So that alone tells you how common it is and how serious it is. Now, men also have a chance of getting breast cancer. 1% of men, according to the stats, are affected by breast cancer. And it is a concern because often men don't think that they will get breast cancer, but 1%, although it may seem low, the problem we often have is the late diagnosis of breast cancer, especially among both women and men.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions around breast cancer in men particularly? I mean, I can imagine that there would be so many, right?
Yeah, I think the fact that men don't think that they can have breast cancer, that alone will tell you that, it's often not taken seriously. But I think although we may not say, do a self-breast examination every single month, men also have breast tissue. And so when you pick up a lump and, you know that something's going on in your breast, you need to have that investigated just as women would do as well. So it's the late diagnosis because men don't think, if they do present with the lump, it's often, no, I think it's something else. It's just a lump and maybe I've hurt myself or I've just got a bump. That could be some of the myths surrounding men, especially with breast cancer.
Yeah, I feel like because, cancer is in so many parts of our country so misunderstood, we almost need to go back to the basics, right, and answer some of the more simple questions like, is breast cancer preventable?
Yeah, so unfortunately, with regard to cancer, you can't prevent cancer as such because, we haven't found all the research that will tell us, okay, this is the exact reason why the cells have gone abnormal. So you can't really prevent cancer or prevent breast cancer, but you can definitely reduce your risk of getting cancer because there are certain known factors that contribute to breast cancer.
Yeah, and what are the factors then that we can, be aware of to reduce then the likelihood of contracting breast cancer?
Yeah, so if we look at the lifestyle factors, just looking around you, we find that a lot of people have changed their habits. And this could be one of the reasons why breast cancer is on the increase as well. If you think of lifestyle factors like smoking, tobacco use, and you look around, I'm sure you've been out there and you've seen more women now are also using cigarettes and using e-cigarettes. So tobacco is one of the known factors for cancer, including alcohol. And then we have the other issue of obesity as well. You know, you look at the diets and what we're eating now, all of that contributes towards breast cancer and other cancers as well.
Yeah.
Now, if you bring it home to women itself, family history of having cancer, that is so important. And you know, we have this myth of not telling anyone when we've got cancer because we think that there's a stigma attached to it, or we think that, you know, maybe it's contagious. People will think less of me because I've got cancer. But having a family history, not only of breast cancer, but even prostate cancer. So genetics plays an important factor in breast cancer. And I'm sure you've known of famous people who've actually gone in and, because of their family history, have bilateral mastectomies, removing both the breasts because they don't want to get the cancer. So we're not asking people to do that, but we're saying speak to your family about your cancer so that, you know, your future generations will know about it. And I think just being a woman as well, you know, increases your chance of getting breast cancer. And then, you know, as we get older, you know, any cancer increases our risk. But you know what we are finding now, younger people are being diagnosed with cancer as well. I was at a university the other day, and there was a girl in her early 20s who said to me, I'm a survivor of breast cancer. So, you know, it's not only a cancer of the age. So one of the important genes is the BRCA2, BRCA1 and BRCA2 as well. And then if you think about hormone replacement therapy, so when you think, you know, women often when they go undergoing a menopause, they need to go onto hormone replacement therapy. This is a risk factor. And we at the Cancer Association say, we're not saying don't use it, but use it under supervision. Make sure you go and, you know, you have your test done and your doctor knows about what you're doing. So those are some of the factors. And then something else that often women don't think about, breastfeeding. So if you have had children, breastfeeding is important in reducing your risk of getting cancer, breast cancer as well.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot just listening to all of those different factors, and I think that's why this work is so important, right? And you talk about the age factor. My next question was going to be, at what age do we need to start, you know, getting checked for lumps? And you know, the importance of just being able to educate ourselves about how we do that for ourselves at home as well. But I suppose after you've talked about the age matter, there really isn't a particular age to start, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, you find that with younger people, because the breasts are quite dense, you know, you can't go in for your mammograms and things, but there are other tests you can do. But the fact that when you start menstruating, it's important to start checking your breasts. Okay. So screening is very, very essential for women, and it helps to catch cancer early. And we always talk about catching cancer early. What does this mean? Why is it important? It's important because if your cancer is picked up early, you have an improved chance and a better quality of life as well. You know, there's treatment options out there. So can I go into some of the ways in which women can reduce the risk? It could be
briefly,
Yeah, quickly. Thank you so much. So clinical breast examinations. So sometimes when you go in for your pap smear in a clinic, the nurse might do an examination of your breast, or if you go in to see a doctor, he might examine your breast as well, especially if you are, you know, undergoing a pap smear test. Now, women can also, and men, do their self-breast examinations. So it's basically standing in front of the breast, a mirror, and having a look at your breast, examining your breast, because, you know, when there's something abnormal in your body, it's only you as an individual that will know there's something wrong, because your body talks to you. It tells you that something is wrong. And so look out for those warning signs.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, women over 40 can also go in for a mammogram. And obviously in the public sector, when you present with symptoms, you can go for further investigations, which may include a mammogram.
Those are really empowering options that you've given us there, Lorraine. Events that you are having to commemorate Breast Cancer Awareness Month and how some of us can participate?
Oh, thank you so much. So I'm sure many of you have been to Food Lovers Market and seen this wonderful ad out there. And we're so happy that they have partnered with us. So please support that initiative. Go out there, men and women, as you're buying and as we encourage you to have plenty of fruit and vegetables, look out for the stickers and look at the signs. There's some educational material out there as well. In KwaZulu-Natal, we have the Shades of Pink event taking place in October with Davenport Square. If you're not sure, please go to our website and look out for our events. Right. There's so many events, and it's all about being physically active as well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that very enlightening discussion. Very valuable information shared with us there by Lorraine Govender, who is National Manager of Health Promotion at Cancer. You're still watching The Week Ahead. Let's take a short break. Welcome back. You're still watching The Week Ahead. So the third Limpopo Investment Conference is due to take place in this coming week in Polokwane. The province wants to attract domestic and foreign investors from countries like China. The previous investment conference generated about 300 billion rand in investment pledges. Now, questions have been raised, however, on how it will improve the lives of ordinary people. SABC's Katlego Nyoni filed this report.
The purpose of the Limpopo Investment Conference is to stimulate economic growth in the province. Key sectors including mining, small-scale farming, the development of small, medium and micro enterprises, as well as green energy, are viewed as economic drivers that can address the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment and inequality. The provincial government is pinning its hopes on securing 30 billion rand more in investment pledges to facilitate that growth.
This is an exercise of a project to ensure that we stimulate the economic potential of our province and the growth, but also to ensure that through this investment drive we'll be able to create much needed job opportunities that are needed in the province. All of us, we know that we're confronted with the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty and inequality.
The rapid industrialization plan for Limpopo, however, is unlikely to move as fast as the government anticipates. That as challenges of rolling blackouts and water shortages persist. The Musina Makhado Special Economic Zone has stalled because of a legal battle between government and environmental groups. Yet the province still firmly believes it can bolster economic growth through industrialization.
This is the 10th time in succession as a province that will be hosting an investment conference, like I said. And we are very proud to announce that we have achieved some positive spin-offs during the previous 2 editions of the investment conferences.
But some in the business sector aren't sold in the investment conference and its projected targets.
Only when investors channel their resources towards the investees' plans can we say we had a successful investment conference. This is a third conference and there are no opportunities for SMMEs, no real benefits for communities, and joblessness is persisting. We really need to change our approach.
The 2-day conference is scheduled to take place on Thursday and Friday next week. Katlego Nyoni, SABC News, Polokwane.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. That's where we wrap up The Week Ahead. Do stay with SABC News for the remainder of your afternoon. Goodbye.